Hello. We are transmitting to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century. Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost. Whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you. This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 835.AC2710, certificate number 44688, New York to Nome.
Nome, Alaska, the pride of the USA, and you never roam too far from Nome, Alaska.
Jacob, where are you joining us from?
I am in Duluth, Minnesota. So
Wow,
right on the
Duluth.
shores of Lake Superior.
Yeah, the first time I visited Duluth, it was in the early 80s. My parents sent me to Outward Bound. They're in the Boundary Waters.
Yeah, very nice. Cool.
They figured that because I was a delinquent, I'd get straightened out in Outward Bound.
Yeah.
But my delinquency was I didn't smoke or drink or chase girls or anything. I mean, I chased rabbits. My delinquency was that I read comic books and didn't come to dinner when they called. And they sent me to Outward Bound, and Outward Bound put me in a group of youth.
True delinquents.
Yeah, that were like escorted to the airport in handcuffs. And then there was like a sheriff that waited at the end. So it was a real delinquency encouraging event. I came out of there much worse off than I went in.
Yeah, Outward Bound is still there. They've got that big canoe base there, and they're still trying to straighten out delinquents.
Yeah,
even now.
It was the worst because at one point, we were out there canoeing along on week 3, and another group from the same Outward Bound who were not delinquents, but were
like Eagle Scouts or
Eagle Scouts. It was a co-ed group, boys and girls, and they canoed past us, and they were singing. They were all singing some like "On the Shores of Minnetonka" and having the greatest time. And I could swear that they had like
perfectly synchronized
they had
and
cupcakes or whatever. And by that point, we were living on handfuls of rancid butter, and and I slept with one eye open, and it was just like, it was so discouraging.
Korean War MREs. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, so are you from Duluth? Have you always lived there?
No, I am from the Midwest broadly, so a child of divorce. I bounced around from Cleveland, Ohio, and central Iowa, but my wife is from St. Paul. So,
so she was like, I like St. Paul, but could it be colder and worse every way?
It was me who was pushing. So, and we'll probably get into this, but I moved to Minnesota from Nome, Alaska. So I lived in Nome for 7 or 8 years.
You did not.
I did. Yep. So I moved there after I dropped out of college, and I encourage every wayward youth to just move to rural Alaska and kind of sink or swim.
But I mean, Nome
seems to work.
Nome is really for those people who have only heard of it from following the Iditarod, which I know most futurelings do. Nome is really the edge of nowhere, and there's really not very many people there, and there's not a ton to do there.
There's not. It's about 3,000 people. It expands in the summer or during, I think it probably doubles in size during Iditarod. And it's rural bush Alaska. So you're either getting there by plane or boat or dog sled, or in this case, watercraft conveyances, but
or from Russia, you can come across.
Or you can get there from Russia.
From
Yep.
Russia, yeah.
There's plenty to do. You have to. You should probably really love the outdoors if you're going to live in Nome. There's not going to be a rich urban center in which to spend your time.
But am I right that there aren't really even very many trees in Nome?
There are no trees. I used to coach softball quite poorly, and kids would often tell one another to go climb a tree instead of buzzing off. They would say, go climb a tree. Yeah, they've got willows, they've got alders, but it's all kind of little shrubs.
Yeah, scrubs.
Yeah.
And then also not a ton of hills.
There are. Probably by the standards of where you're from in Seattle, they're hills. For me in the upper Midwest, they're mountains. I think Mount Osborne was the biggest peak, and that was in the Kugurack Mountains, and it was maybe 4,000 feet.
Oh, that's a fine mountain. That's a good mountain.
Yeah, not nothing huge, but the logistical challenge I think made it appeling to thrill seekers who would try to bag every peak they could in the state. So
right.
Yeah.
All right. Now I'm not gonna try and exhaust all my Nome questions right here at the top of the show, but do people still mine the beach for gold?
They do. Yeah, that's still a big thing. At the time I lived there, I had a good friend, Petey, we'll call him, who lived in one of those shipping containers.
Yeah.
So a frequent gold camp is. He referred to it as a human dog box. So they basically a human dog house. They will move these shipping containers onto the beach, and you basically live out of there and mine gold 24/7. And of course, in the summer, there's it doesn't get dark, so you could work all day if you wanted to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mining gold on a beach, on an Arctic beach. It really does feel like it's, a lot of kids in Alaska, they go fishing or crabbing right out of high school because they used to be able to make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
But it feels like mining gold in Nome is crabbing, times a dozen. Although maybe it's less because you're not at risk of sinking in the frozen sea.
Yeah, probably not as many drownings, although a number of people would cobble together their own homemade dredges of, driftwood and whatever other debris they could, piece together. And then they would float out there and try to basically hoover up the sand from the seafloor. No drownings that I'm aware of, but, any of those jobs attracts a certain type of person or personality. I think a lot of those professions are, I don't want to cast too wide a net here, but they're largely fueled by cocaine, at least was my experience.
That was always my experience
in
too.
Rural Alaska.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't pay for itself,
No, there's not a lot of extremely sober people who go into those trades.
And so just to wrap up this segment of the show, what did you do there? You don't seem like a coke dealer.
I was not a coke dealer. I worked IT for a tribal corporation up there. So
which one?
Queric. So they were the nonprofit wing of, I'm going to butcher some of these acronyms. This has been 15 years ago, but the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act,
That's right.
Divided the state into 13 regional consortiums. And that one was, I believe, Bering Sea Native Corporation. And they had a nonprofit wing called Queric. So I did IT for them. And it was best decision I made in my life. I was up there as a young 20-year-old. I've got a job out of it. I met my now wife up there when she was a summer intern. So I got a career and a family out of it. So it really worked out well for me.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
My Uncle Jack moved to Alaska in, I think, 1950 and also met his wife who was up there adventuring. And they became Alaskan pioneers. That was, of course, before statehood. So.
Yeah, there was like a pioneer club. Now that you mentioned that I remember up in Nome, and was that the only you had to be up there before they were a state, or you had to have like family ancestry or something up there that predated?
There were a lot of requirements. In Anchorage, there was a pioneer home. If you wanted to retire into like a old folks home, if you met the qualifications as a pioneer, they actually had this whole social safety net. But I don't remember exactly what the requirements were. I know I don't qualify.
Yeah. I recall talking to a few older people up there that were pioneers, and it's probably the time you were up there. It was amazing how flush with cash the state was with all that oil money, and they had like maybe 300,000 people.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things that would be decried as like socialism today, they're just like, it's like coming out of their pockets. It's like, yeah, why not fund an old folks home? We got to do something with this money.
Sure,
like,
that's right. Yeah. Well, my dad was the lawyer for the railroad during the period that they were negotiating the Native Claims Settlement Act.
Oh, very cool.
And so he actually was a part of it. And then for a while, he and my uncle were the managers of the village of North Pole. City managers.
Yeah.
They took over North Pole, and not took over, but the board of directors that was running the village had kind of, I don't want to say ran it into the ground, but it got a little bit, they were out over their skis.
Yeah.
And so, my dad and uncle ran the town of North Pole for a few years.
Very cool. Yeah. And how big is North Pole?
Not very big.
Yeah.
Not very big.
Yeah.
I came back from college and I said, where's my car? Like I'd left my car, which was a 74 Chrysler Newport. And my dad said, oh, I gave it to the village of North Pole. They needed
it had been conscripted.
Yeah, they needed a city car. And I said,
vehicle now.
There's no road to North Pole. And he said, oh, yeah, I drove it up to the Yukon River and put it on a barge and sailed it down to North Pole.
Sure. Yeah, as one does.
And what's crazy is it still had all my stuff in it. Like it had a trunk full of my stuff. I was like, what happened to all my things? And he's like, oh, I didn't think to empty out the car.
So some poor city worker started the car and heard like Ziggy Stardust or something in the 8-track. Like, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And weirder even than that in the trunk.
Stuff recorded off of the shortwave. Yeah.
So we've established our Alaska bona fides and our Minnesota bona fides.
Mm-hmm.
And today's story links the two.
Yeah. So today's story is New York to Nome. And I don't recall how I even heard about this story or book. I remember reading it when I was in Nome, but I think I may have gone to the city museum once randomly, which seemingly flooded every other year. At the time, it was right on the coast, and I think they've moved it since, but they would ask for volunteers to move, boxes of newspapers and other artifacts in and out of there. And maybe I saw something about it there.
Doesn't it seem like if you are running a city and there's a place that gets flooded every year, that you would just not have a thing there?
What should we use the space for? Museum, tax records, archive. Yeah. They have since moved it, but coastal flooding definitely hit them all the time. So I think I read about it there, and I don't know why it stuck with me. It's a short read. I mean, the book is maybe 160 pages. And I had some old beat up paperback copy that I must have scrounged up somewhere in Nome.
Well, that's the thing about books in Nome, right? Once they go to Nome, they're unlikely to leave.
Nothing leaves. I was thinking about your car. Your car is still probably in the village of North Pole because by the time you ship something to one of these villages, it is there forever.
Yeah.
I don't know how old your father would have been right now. My dad is in his 70s, and I flew him up once.
And he never left?
No, he did leave,
Okay.
which was probably good for both of us. But he was amazed, and I could see the wheels turning as he calculated the scrap value of every piece of junk left there over the last 100 years. Like
The gold dredges alone, massive
they
machines.
throw away nothing. If he could figure out shipping costs, I'm pretty sure would be, operating a scrapyard right now in rural Alaska material. Anyway, so I read about it up there, and I recently came back to it, I think because I had heard this name randomly. I was browsing Wikipedia late at night, as one does, and I came across a description of a ship called the Sheila Yates. And the Sheila Yates was a custom-built wooden-hulled sailboat that operated out of Duluth here in the 70s and 80s.
Really?
So
how old was the Sheila Yates at the time?
Maybe 10 or 20 years old.
Oh, so it was a new wooden sailboat.
Correct. Yeah. So Jeff Pope, who was one of the people in this story, had it built in the 1960s, I believe, out of Canada, some shipyard in Canada. And something clicked where I recognized that name, and I was able to piece it together. That was the guy I read about in that canoe story, 15 years ago. And that's what got me interested in starting to look into it again. Why I remembered that and not, my children's birthday on recall or any other more important fact, but some cosmic ray tripped, some bite of memory in my head where I was able to make that connection.
Now, you've revealed a little bit. When you talked about a trip from Alaska to Nome, you did not mention canoe until just now. It slipped out.
Yeah. So the story of New York to Nome, it'd be one thing if they flew. That's you can do that commercially to this day.
Yeah, still an adventure though.
It's still a long trip. You will 50-50 chance you don't leave Kotzebue. That you make it to Nome on time.
Yep. The weather comes in and.
Yep. But in this story, these two men canoed from New York City to Nome. And they left in 1936 is when this trip started off. Yeah.
So in 1936, you could drive from New York to California fairly easily, although not without any complication.
Yeah. Still probably I would imagine a multi-week trip by then.
But this was certainly a long time before the Alcan Highway.
Yes.
There was no road to Alaska at all.
None. No.
And there is still no road to Nome even to this day.
To this day, there is no road. Yeah. I think the closest you could get is maybe Fairbanks.
Which is not close.
Which is hundreds of miles away. Yeah.
And so they're going to canoe from New York. Now I'm trying to imagine, stop me when I get off course, but did they go up the Hudson River to the Erie Canal and then through the Great Lakes?
Yeah, they did. You got it exactly. And I'm getting ahead of myself here because I didn't know what way this would take. But I guess I wanted to ask one question of you. When you went on your famous walk across Europe, how much prep
have I mentioned that? Did I mention
I've heard it. That's the word on the street, at least here in Duluth.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that, hey, if you're talking to John, ask him about his walk across Europe.
Well, I don't know if I've ever really gotten into it, but you're absolutely right. I did.
How much prep did you do for that?
Almost none. I realized that my band at the time, the Western State Hurricanes, two of the guys left the band, and we had a show, like a finale. It wasn't, when we booked the show, it wasn't meant to be a finale. It was meant to be a triumphal, big, probably our biggest show yet. And then they left the band, and I was so devastated that because this band was, the culmination of a decade of trying to be in successful bands, that I went to my boss and I said, I quit. I went to my roommate and said, I'm leaving you the apartment and all of my things. And I went down to a travel agency, which was how we used to book things, that was there on Broadway in Seattle. And I said, get me a ticket to the cheapest place in Europe that leaves, the soonest. And it was a week later, and it was to London. And that was the extent. I think I checked a book out in the library about Romania, because that was the place that I was the most concerned about. Just having a vague sense of like, I don't know, Romania still feels a little wild. But other than that, I did no walking. I did no
physical preparation.
Because my premise was, well, walking isn't hard. We do it every day.
Sure.
And so this would just be walking in one direction. I wouldn't turn around and go home. And I would just walk until the sun went down. It turned out that at first, it's after you get about 15 miles, you're tired.
Yeah.
And your feet hurt.
How old were you when you did this?
30
walk?
years old, which,
okay, so that's, yeah. All right. That's a little bit older than I would have, to a young man in his early 20s. Sure.
Exactly. So this was, when I look back at the life story of like some of these tech billionaires, by 25, they're already, they already own a helicopter.
Yeah.
And at 30 years old, I could say to my roommate, you can have all my stuff. And from his standpoint, that was like, great, I guess. Like,
thank you.
There's not a ton of stuff here that anyone would want. So I hadn't yet, I was not necessarily thriving. I think culturally maybe was thriving, but 30 years old, I had very little that it mattered that I left behind.
Yeah. Well, at 30 years old, I'm just thinking physically, that is the age where if you sleep on a park bench overnight, you will be sore the next morning, right? Yes. It's not early 20s. I'm just going to roll off of this thing and there will be a lot of pep in my step as I start my next 30 miles today.
That's right. And, I had slept on a lot of park benches in my 20s, so I felt like, how hard can this be?
Sure.
But then in my 30s, I think the first night that I slept outside on that trip, I was astonished at how much harder it could be.
Yeah.
I didn't like it at all. And in my 20s, I'd been like, oh, well, it's free at least.
What a fun adventure. I'm saving money.
Yeah. And at 30, I was like, this really sucks a lot. Also, I'm cold and lonely, and I don't remember being cold or lonely when I was 20.
It's about that same amount of planning went into this trip.
Wow.
So this would have been, they started off in 1936. They were working for the McFadden Publication Company, which was owned by Bernard McFadden. And just side note to anyone who's listening, he could be an omnibus in and of himself. He was a early health fitness nut, pre-Jack LaLanne, who advocated all sorts of things from weightlifting, which great, probably healthy, to grape-based diets, to he tried to form his own religion. A grade A. This is an omnibus level quack that needs to be explored and preserved for the future.
Yeah, we've talked about a few of these. They usually have an enema component to their philosophy, right? Like you're supposed to eat just grape nuts and 6 enemas a day.
I don't know the tenets of his proposed religion, but I imagine that played a heavy role. So anyway, they worked for this guy, and they were just clerks, but it was the height of the Depression. So they were both, early 20s and really lucky to have the job. Mm-hmm. But I think they disliked the man and were also, as 20-year-olds, tend to do, were bored and wanted more and wanted an adventure. So over a round of drinks, they decide they're going to go on a canoe trip. And as they drink more, they think, not only would this be a fun adventure, but we could sell this story. This could be our ticket to riches.
Right, they were proto-influencers.
Exactly. They thought that they were, the next in a great line of explorers of that era, right? Like Odmundson, move over. In their own words, as they completed this trip, they claimed they basically discovered the Northwest Passage.
Right, which had been something that eluded better navigators than they.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they decide basically right then and there they're going to go to Nome. It's not quite clear if this was like pure drunkenness and bravado and they just kind of egged each other on. But that's what they decide to do. And
I can relate to this. Can you? I mean, do you have an adventurous personality?
I moved to rural Alaska in my 20s, not knowing
Duluth,
somebody.
Minnesota.
I lived out of a van a summer in Nome to save rent money. So
how did the van even get there? It's $1 million question.
It was actually a surplus city vehicle.
Yeah, there it is. It probably belonged to a teenager and his dad stole it. Well, futurelings, the holiday season is upon us. And if you're like me, every year at this time, you think, I'd really like to get my shopping done now so that I'm not running around scrambling on December 23rd trying to fill 5 different people's stockings. Maybe you're not like me and you already did all your Christmas shopping in July. But for me, the prospect of going out to some big box store on Christmas Eve and scrambling trying to find interesting things, it's just a nightmare every year. And that's why Uncommon Goods has been such a great relief to me, because they take the stress out of this kind of gifting. And unlike the kind of cookie cutter gifts that you're going to find in the checkout line at REI or wandering in those back corridors or the back corners of Target, Uncommon Goods has thousands of unique, high quality, often handmade gifts that just like are kind of they are perfect at filling the holiday gift gap. They're many of them made in the United States, which is important to me nowadays, just because, not for any nationalist reasons, but just because trying to keep focused on things that are crafted and not just punched out of a mold. I've found so many things on Uncommon Goods, and now I've been looking at it the last few days in terms of filling up a shopping cart for all of the myriad people I have to buy Christmas presents for, and I'm just finding that it's a one-stop solution to holiday gift giving, because I've got grandparents, I've got a guy, I have to buy gifts for a guy that has been given so many pocket knives that were bought in a checkout line, like he could basically build a shelter just out of pocket knives. And yet, and I've looked for gifts for him at REI, and there's nothing he doesn't have. But I found some very clever solutions on Uncommon Goods. And in addition to that, the people that are making and putting the presents up, putting products up on Uncommon Goods, they are small artists. They're independent businesses. They're the kind of people that, in a world that we're trying to kind of reinvent right now, how do we get small again? How do we build community again? How do we kind of combat this tendency for business and for economics to be this global infrastructure where people in other countries are working for pennies a day? Like, these products are supporting people that you can actually know. You actually can sense who is making these things, and this is their big swing, right? They're making these things because they also want to be independent business people. And for every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. So you get to pick where their nonprofit donation goes. So
do this before we get too much closer to the holidays. Cross these names off your list before the rush. All your 35 gifts that you need to get, and get 15% off your next gift by going to uncommongoods.com/omnibus. Remember to put the /omnibus in there so that they know that you're coming from me. Uncommongoods.com/omnibus for 15% off Uncommon Goods, where everything there is going to be out of the ordinary.
So you can relate being in a bar, a few drinks in, and like, oh, you know what we should do? And
100%.
then it just tumbles, and it's like, well, you know, what we should do is climb the Eiffel Tower from the outside or whatever.
And you're really hoping the next morning that it's forgotten about, that no one else will bring it up the next morning. Like, hey, we got a lot of laughs out of that. That would have been a great what if. Haha, guys. Let's just go to work, please.
Right.
And nurse this hangover. Yeah.
So who was it who was the nutter butter that said, no, this is a good idea?
Well, it's an interesting part of this story. So there's two men that undertake this, Jeff Pope, who I've mentioned, and the other man is Shell Taylor. And they are, could not be more different. So Shell is, I would say, the main protagonist. He's the more energetic, type A, two-fisted, go get him type guy. Exactly. Jeff Pope is portrayed in this book, which I should mention, this book is based on the recollections of Shell Taylor alone.
Okay. All right. So it's like the Lewis and Clark expedition where Clark is kind of, only there in fits and starts.
Aside from, I think, shared love of drinking, they immediately do not get along with one another. Like right off the bat, before they leave, they publish a 10 Commandments for the trip. And I'll have to see if I can pull it up in my show notes here, but
just to try and keep the other one, like put some borders around each other.
I think just to try to keep the peace. They were both self-aware enough, at least, to know that they weren't going to get along on this trip, probably, but they were both interested and wanted to make the best out of it. So, they come up with this 10 Commandments for themselves. It's mostly, we have to make decisions as a team. There's no one leader.
Yeah.
Don't go to bed angry, et cetera, things like that.
And so how would you describe their two characters?
It's interesting. I've tried to do a lot of research, and I feel, you want to talk about feeling like a really old man weirdo. I've written out to relatives and friends of these long deceased men to get a better sense. I have. Yeah. It's really been a fun little side project for me, part genealogy, like who's around that even remembers these guys.
And you don't have any connection to them. You're not like a nephew.
No, my connection is I love to canoe, and I live in Duluth and once lived in Nome and heard about the story. That's it.
You buried the lead. I didn't know you loved to canoe.
I do love to canoe. Yeah, that's I moved from Nome, Alaska to the Twin Cities, and you want to talk about a culture shock. My wife was from there, so I did it. It was good for my career, but Duluth is a nice, happy medium for us, and it's fairly close to the Boundary Waters. So
yeah, canoeing, the best canoeing in the universe.
Yeah. Yep. So, the sense I get from them is, like I said, Shell's very type A, outgoing, energetic, almost annoyingly so, I would say. And Jeff is more quiet and reserved. As you read through this book and Shell's recollections, he hates is maybe a strong word, but they really don't like each other. He calls him Sleeping Jesus. Shell refers to Jeff as that because he constantly sleeps in.
But I don't know if that's like a diss or if that's like a stealth compliment, like Sleeping Jesus. Yeah, it's like some kind of white wizard.
So they they come up with this 10 commands. But again, it's the height of the Depression, so they have thought about this. They've decided they're going to do it. They start boasting about it before they're going to do it. They offer the story to their boss, Bernard McFadden, saying, "Hey, you want to get in on the ground floor of this? This is going to be, the next big news item, I guess." Again, I cannot stress the lack of planning that's gone into this adventure. So,
but did they try to sell it to him like, "Hey, we'll just eat grape nuts and do like wildland enemas every night and like and sell your program"? Was there that?
There was an element of that. Yeah, of course, Bernard McFadden had his own, health correspondence course you could sign up for and that they could help sell. But they have no funding for this trip. And they, at some point, Shell's sister is named Muriel, and she is married to the pianist of Don Bester's orchestra. Now, Don Bester is a name that means nothing to me. I had to Google it, but he would have been not the Casey Kasem of the 1930s. He was the band leader for Jack Benny's radio show.
Oh, okay. So not like a ragtime guy, but
Love, I guess, on Fallon, right?
Right.
And there's a whole interesting side story there where she was married to she was proposed by, she was going to be married to some famous industrial magnate, and then claimed that he was seduced by another woman and sued that woman in court, I guess, for seducing her future husband. And they settled out of court. There was enough merit there. So she got a small fortune that way, I think $40,000 in 1936 dollars.
Can you imagine that the proposal represented like a cash winnings?
Yeah, there was
that you could then say like, you've stolen my literal like cash,
my living. Yeah,
wow.
I would be fascinated to dig up the court records on that if they even exist, and maybe one day I will, because this story has taken me down all sorts of weird rabbit holes already. So why not add to it? But anyway, Shells Taylor agrees that she'll fund the expedition and gives them $400, which in today's equivalent is about $10,000.
Sure.
So, enough. And within that $10,000, in less than 30 days, they have to buy a canoe, buy all their equipment to, undertake this journey. And they manage to do it, but they buy like a really crappy canoe right off the start.
It would seem like that would be the thing you'd spend your money on, right?
One would think. Again, not a lot of planning here. And I don't know the canoe scene in New York City, especially in the 1930s. I would imagine
there was already Abercrombie and Fitch, right? There would have been sporting goods stores that sold canoes.
What one would think. So they do get their canoe. They get all their gear. They've got their money. And now they're trying to, they really do think this is going to be like a movie when they're done, that they're going to have a book deal, that the nation will be following their progress. So they hire an agent.
So isn't that funny that
money?
This sounds so contemporary, just like the fantasy of like, we're going to be famous for some dumb stunt. And yet it dates to at least the 30s. Probably this is ancient. This is as old as trees, right?
Time is a flat circle. I mean, this is, I'm sure some influencer has like an equally harebrained scheme, right now that's probably on TikTok or something that I'm not seeing.
Right. I'm going to ride my cat around the world or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Please crowdfund me as I attempt to be the first man to unicycle, from North to South America.
Okay, so they buy a crap canoe and they already hate each other, but they've got a little bit of money left to spend.
Yep. They've got a fair amount of money. So they basically start, they do a little bit of prep, crucially, and that is they go to the New York City Library, and it's unclear if they steal these maps or copy them somehow, but aerial photography has just been enough of a thing that for the most part, they are able to pen and paper kind of plot their route across. And this would have been a recent innovation. So that's the whole thing that even kind of makes it feasible is they've got very grainy black and white aerial photographs for most of the trip.
So
they've
as
got some
someone
maps.
as someone who has who's been in the Boundary Waters canoe area, let me explain to our listeners the concept of the portage or portage. Which do you say?
Portage, but I'm a snooty, Duluth, North Coast.
Which is, as everybody can probably guess, there is not a direct water course all the way anywhere. And so what you do is you get to the end of some long lake, or you get to the end of, to the headwaters of the stream, and then you pick up your canoe, put it on your shoulders, and walk to the next waterway.
Yep.
And then you go back and you get your luggage, and then you walk that. And by this method, you travel by water, but there's a certain large amount of not just walking, but also carrying heavy, awkward things.
Carrying a heavy, in this case, like cedar and canvas canoe with a sail and, supplies for weeks at a time. Yeah. Yeah.
So how far do they get before they first have to lift the boat out of the water and schlep it?
Almost immediately, they are too close to a very large shipping boat in New York City and immediately have to seek refuge on a beach and dry out all of their gear within the first day. After that, they learn, a little bit. They're sticking close to the coast. And like you mentioned earlier, they basically start following the Great Lakes and the lock system through. And this is probably the most civilized portion of their trip. At some point they actually multiple times they're stopping at yacht clubs. They were successful, or their agent was, and there were a couple of AP news briefs about this trip. So, they bragged at one point that it was front page news on the New York Times, and it sounded dubious. I checked, it was, but what I did not realize is in 1936, there's 20 stories on the front page.
Yeah, have you seen the front page of the New York Times? It's just it's a wall of text.
The wall of text. Yeah. And it's, Hitler's up to no good, 2 men canoeing to Nome, Mrs. Right. So-and-so won, cutest baby award.
Cat caught in tree.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot making it to the front page in those days, but they had gained some publicity. And so they were stopping at yacht clubs along the way. Some men and, pleasure cruises, yachts and stuff like that would stop and welcome them aboard. So
it wasn't a thing where little girls were lined up on either side of the canal waving pennants, but people knew about them enough to say
about them. Yeah. And they're going through an industrial area as well. Right. So they would have factory workers wave and, toss them a hot sandwich or something as they paddled by. So that first part of the trip, aside from them not liking one another, it goes relatively smoothly. They're getting a lot of free food, a lot of free meals along the way. It really goes well until they get to Grand Portage in Minnesota, and at that point they've traversed the whole Great Lakes. So they've made
nowhere left to go.
Yep, they've made it from New York City to the Great Lakes. And again, that's all a fairly civilized area even back then. Not a lot to get lost on. And then they have to hit the Grand Portage, and that's really where their story starts. And what's interesting in this book, again, we only have Shell's recount. You can tell when the going is easy because he writes a ton, and then they cover hundreds of miles with maybe one entry.
Right, of course.
He's exhausted.
You're tired, and it's dark at night, or harder.
Exactly. But they did you ever make it to Grand Portage when you stopped?
How close is Grand Portage to Thunder Bay?
Pretty close. It's maybe an hour and a half away.
Yeah, no, I don't think we got there on canoe, but on some like across Canada rock and roll tour, I mean, I certainly went through Thunder Bay enough times.
Sure. Yeah. So Grand Portage, they had read about. I think it's more historically famous than it is today. It was the Burning Man of the fur trade days, right? Like,
oh, the big party, right, where they all come
everyone would go there, and they, that's where they're making all your deals, and it was just talk
about cocaine.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. Whatever birch root they were smoking back then, I don't know, but and so they had this very clear picture in their head when they get to Grand Portage that they're going to be like welcomed as heroes, and it's going to be a bustling native village with fur traders trading beaver pelts for traps and ammunition.
Right.
And they describe it as a wide open, sloping meadow infested by a rolling cloud of mosquitoes and dive-bombing horseflies, and not a soul to be found.
Oh, not a soul.
I think it's today. It's part of some native land, and they've got a national monument and like a restored kind of trading post. But
right.
I think back then it was just kind of a hill leading into the lake that was swampy.
Did you ever, in your time in Alaska, did you ever go down to Anchorage for the fur rendezvous?
I never made it to Fur Rondi. No.
Yeah.
That is truly heard stories.
Yeah, that is a big trade beaver pelts for gold nuggets and trade gold nuggets for cocaine.
Yes.
And trade cocaine for, like female companionship.
Yes.
But yeah, this sounds like maybe not quite the not quite the hot time in the old town.
No, there was no cocaine, no women, no beaver pelts, at least to trade.
But it's there. Grand Portage is there, and it's named Grand Portage for a reason.
Yeah, and that is that you're about to walk, 60 some miles to get to the next navigable waterway. Good luck.
But this is the shortest distance. This is
it. Yeah.
Okay. Good luck.
So they do make it through Grand Portage. They and then they start hitting basically the chain of lakes and the boundary waters in Quetico that you probably remember. And
I do.
And for the listeners, I cannot describe how easily, I'm not going to pretend I'm great with directions, but I have a GPS and I will occasionally get lost there. I mean, there's very little topography in which to triangulate yourself. You're looking for, did somebody cut and make a notch in that tree that indicates a portage that I'm supposed to see from across the lake? It's very easy to get lost there.
There's a lot of that. I mean, nowadays, or at least when I did it, which was not nowadays, long time ago, but there's a fire watch tower every 3 days. But fortunately, this was the part of how I survived. None of the juvenile delinquents could read a map or use a compass. And because I'd grown up in Alaska, map reading, I'm not going to say that everybody that grows up in Alaska is some kind of, voyageur, but I could read a map. And so they did need me. And I think it's the only reason they didn't kill me and submerge me in a swamp.
Sure. So that's what got you the extra North Korean War rations.
That's right. That little thing, which was they would look at a map and they just didn't know which end was up. And I at least knew this is north. And I know you think it's that way, but it's that way.
Did you ever get your group lost?
Well, it's the thing about being the one navigator is never admit that you're lost.
Sure.
And so
whatever route you take is how long it takes.
Yeah, there were definitely times when halfway through something, I realized that we were not that, and then I just had to oh yes, and then up here we go 180 degrees, and they were too stupid to argue. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. As much as I kind of dunked on them earlier for having no preparation at all, it is amazing to me that they were able to cobble together this route from either stolen or poorly photocopied maps, from aerial photography, because I tried to recreate it from the comfort of my desk, while eating and drinking on
Using
Google Earth.
Earth.
And it was hard for me to retrace. So they do manage somehow. They go over Grand Portage. They make it to, I think, Fort Francis is their first stop I think that's still that might be Canada. I don't recall, but that's kind of their first stop after their big Great Lakes navigation. And they're sorely disappointed that they have no mail waiting for them. They've not gotten any stories published yet. There are no royalty checks waiting for them from their agent.
What a disappointment.
Yeah, but they're they're that far in at this point. They've gone probably a couple 100 miles, so they decide to keep pushing on, and it's at this point where the book becomes a little bit more sparse, because this is a heavy portage trip, and they must just be exhausted.
I can't fathom it, frankly, because carrying a canoe is a lot.
Yes.
And carrying your food and bags is a lot. But carrying a canoe, your bags, and a mast and sail. In my experience, when you portage, right, you make multiple trips from lake to lake. It's very hard to put all that on your back, but you're not going to make multiple trips over 60 miles.
No, and I think they, in
Do
order
they have
to
wheels?
meet their,
Did they have like a couple of wheels or something?
they did it. It's also kind of astounding that this was all like, today you can go spend hundreds and thousands of dollars and get like very light backpacking gear, right?
Right.
Waterproof canvas was with wax coating on it was probably cutting edge at the time, or at least the norm. Everything had to have just been so heavy. They didn't have MREs. They brought a 22 along to shoot small animals and fish.
But you're right. Everything was waxed canvas and then leather and brass.
Yeah, and there were no backpacking meals, right? You look in the book, they've got a log of stuff they bought, and I'm always amazed by this, where I don't know what you would pack on your like long trips on the road, but I'm guessing it wasn't like 5 pounds of flour and 2 pounds of butter and bacon rashers, and
although
that's what they had
when we were in Outward Bound, right? This was 1983, 82, and that is the stuff we had. We had staples, and we would make flapjacks, and we had honey and butter, that we're carrying in our bags in
big crocs
in the summer. Like it's crazy to think, but of course we had 6 of us, 9 of us maybe, and we did have they had invented aluminum by that point, at least.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you're saving a little bit of weight. Now that I'm thinking of your trip, I wonder, did you ever happen to visit the root beer lady when you were out there?
So I remember the root beer lady, but we did not visit her. No.
Bummer. You were maybe too bad at miscreants to stay away from the root beer lady.
Yeah. Our path did not take us that way.
I
think the other kids, the nice kids, got to visit her.
Got to get the root beer. They have a root beer lady museum, actually.
Would you describe for our listeners the root beer lady?
Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the root beer lady was a nurse from Chicago whose brother owned a fishing camp in the Boundary Waters. And when it was made a wilderness area, certain people were grandfathered into owning a commercial enterprise of land there, and she was one of them. So this was an old, very stout and hardy woman who made subgrade root beer for visitors to Boundary Waters. People would describe picking sticks and bugs out of it, but I'm sure it tasted fantastic, right, on a hot summer day when you're paddling in your aluminum canoe with 5 pounds of flour. So, yes, that's the root beer lady.
It sounds great to us North Americans, but people in other countries think that root beer, which is an American drink, they think it tastes terrible. Even the best root beer, they think it tastes like cough syrup. And I guess they're not wrong.
Yeah,
but we all grew up on root beer, and it's one of our favorite things.
Right. It's like the same feeling I get when I eat like tropical flavored Tums. It's like, I know this is awful, but I kind of like it. Anyway, they've made it to Canada at this point. They're disappointed because they're not hitting the news like they thought, and they basically just trudge along. They have to average, I think to make their goal to do this in 18 months, they said they had to average 21 miles a day.
That's insane.
Yeah, and Shell will not let them stop unless they hit 21 miles a day.
Oh my God, he's the worst. I hate him already.
The worst. So they are, and he always gets up first. He always starts the fire, and this becomes a major point of contention between him and Jeff. He's angry that Jeff has the gall to want to sleep in to 8 a.m. on a day after paddling and portaging over 20 miles.
Sleeping Jesus.
Exactly. Just so angry at sleeping Jesus. They so they make it past Fort Francis. Eventually they make it up to Grand Rapids, which is the head of Lake Winnipeg. And that is like truly the last of their lake crossings. They've kind of, at this point, passed the boundary waters. They're, a good ways into Canada at this point. And from here on out, they describe it as just small creeks and lakes. So their Northwest Passage is like 50% them dragging canoes through small streams and little tiny ponds. You look at this portion on the map and you're like, how do you take a canoe on this spot without it being a major, pain? And the answer is you don't really. You just.
This is not the land of 10,000 lakes. There are a lot of lakes, but not enough lakes.
Not enough lakes, and they tend to be oriented like northeast to southwest, right? They're not
because of
really
the glacial scrape.
Exactly. Yep, yeah. They're not going the direction that they want them to. So, they really just describe this portion of the trip as kind of a drudge. They're several months in at this point. They haven't made any money on their trip. At one point, they have a 13-mile portage to go from Peter Pond Lake to what's the Methye Portage. And they hire a native man and his horse team to carry their canoe this 13-mile portage. And they describe it as the horse was just a beaten-up, old, tired nag. The horse makes it about a mile. And then they have to argue with the man to get their money back and portage the rest of it.
Then they have to carry the horse.
Then they take pity on the guy because this is his living, and they end up helping him like portage the stuff that he was hired to cross. And so, same thing. They're just going across these lakes. Finally, September 25th, so that's 5 months after they've left, they've made it from New York City to Fort McMurray.
Fort McMurray. I know Fort McMurray.
Yep. I know nothing about Fort McMurray other than it's in Canada.
Right. It is in Canada.
Is there much else to know? It's in Alberta, Canada, now that I've got my map pulled in front of me.
Yeah, it's it's like big places up there are few and far between, but Fort McMurray is like there are a lot of rivers kind of in and out of it. And it's like up, it's a crossroads. My dad was a small plane pilot who loved to fly in the Arctic. And so he went from little northern village to little northern village. But Fort McMurray is like way, way north of Edmonton. It's up in, it's what you would properly call, I think, getting up there into, it's not above the Arctic Circle, but it's
It's up there.
It's the north,
Yeah, you're at that point you're like almost like Juneau level, I guess, to give listeners an idea, right? So if you think
Right.
about how far north Juneau is,
But you're not in Northwest Territories. You're not all the way
No.
up to. You're still in the lower provinces.
yep, you're still in the interior there. So that is a major milestone for them because they've completed the hardest part of their trip now.
What?
They're still in one piece, and crucially now there's a river that they can follow.
But it is September.
It is September in northern Canada. Yeah. So it's getting cold, and they know they have to make good time at this point. But again, thankfully they've hit this river. I believe it is the Athabascan River that goes all the way, I think, into the Arctic Ocean. It goes to the Great Slave Lake. So that's what they do. They follow this river now, and they make it to Fort Chipewyan, which was their original goal, where they were going to stop for the winter. They planned on overwintering there. They describe there's a little bit of ice on the lakes now as they're paddling, and they get to Fort Chipewyan, and the clerk there, they don't like the cut of his jib because he besmirched their character somehow, and Shell on the spot decides, to hell with you, we're going to keep going. Just right on the spot there.
Futurelings, as most of you know, I have a teenage daughter, and the degree to which cell phones are core to her and her friends' world of interaction, like they see the world with cell phones as kind of the intermediary, and I have to admit that I'm the same. But when I was first trying to get her into some kind of cell phone, and I'm here to admit that she's got a flip phone, not a smartphone, much to her consternation. But I went down to my, what had been my cell phone provider and tried to set up what seemed like it should be a very simple and inexpensive cell phone relationship. And I just had that very common experience we've all had at a cell phone provider where we'll put you into this plan where this part is free, but that part we charge you, 17 times a year, which is strange because there's only 12 months in a year, but, and here we're going to give you this, but we're taking it out of that. And when it all breaks down and you look at your final monthly bill, all that free stuff somehow ended up costing you somewhere else. And it was a big, expensive deal. And that's why I was so excited when I discovered Mint Mobile, right? Because Mint Mobile lets you keep your old cell phone number. It lets you keep your contacts. Mint Mobile's got like the largest 5G network in the nation, but it's extremely inexpensive, especially given the quality of the product or the quality of the services. But it's really straightforward. And right now, here at the end of the year, Mint Mobile's best deals are available right now. You can get a 3, 6, or 12-month unlimited plan for $15 a month. All those plans come with high-speed data, unlimited talk and text. So you bring all your phone number and everything over to Mint, and there's no crazy contracts, no crazy convoluted deals where this is that and this is that, and then it's $180 a month. It's a really great opportunity. Mint Mobile is a great product, and I know a lot of kids in my daughter's group are also very aware of it, and it's kind of like it's like their hipster cell phone plan. So here's what you need to do. Get premium wireless for $15 a month by going to mintmobile.com/omnibus. Remember that /omnibus. mintmobile.com/omnibus and sign up for, and you can choose 3, 6, or 12-month unlimited plans for $15 a month. This is a limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for the 3-month plan, $90 for the 6-month plan, or $180 for the 12-month plan required. That's all $15 a month. Taxes and fees are extra. Initial plan term only. More than 35 gigabytes might slow when network is super busy, and you need a capable device. Availability and speed and coverage varies. Go to mintmobile.com for details.
Had they made arrangements to spend the winter? Or is this one of those like, hey, have you guys got a spare room?
It was that, yeah. Have you got a spare room? What's interesting to me, and I didn't know this, any town in Canada that has the name Fort, or basically Northwest Alaska, was a former Hudson Bay trading post.
Oh, of course it was.
So that's what Fort Chipewyan is. They had kind of planned on that, being able to stop and get provisions, at these Hudson Bay trading posts. But the Hudson Bay clerk there pisses him off because he didn't think they would make it that far. And so they decide to keep going. So they proceed up the Slave River, and they're just kind of hitting all of the small little trading post villages along the way. They finally make it to Fort Smith, which Fort Smith is, I think that's the cutoff, like between the Northwest Territories and Alberta. It's right on the border there, to give people a sense. And it's winter in northern Canada at that point, right? They are waking up to snow on the ground and ice, and it kind of becomes their way. They go to a bar there and they meet a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer named Ken Weaver, who
figures in the story.
He does figure in the story. He shares his rum ration with them, and they basically end up. They wake up the next morning hungover, and that's where they're going to spend the winter, basically.
I mean, I've gone to parties and ended up living there. But usually there was a girl that played some role in that. It's interesting that this was just rum, but I can picture it. I can see it.
Yeah, what I learned, and I hope I get the history right. I'm sure Canadian listeners can fill me in on this, but this would have been very slightly past Prohibition. And so what the Canadian government decided was that you would get they called it permit liquor. I think it must have been every, man, woman, and maybe child was able to redeem a permit for so much liquor or alcohol for the month. So yeah, that's where they decide to spend the winter, and they've had no planning at this point. But Ken Weaver, the RCMP, the Mountie, finds a old spare cabin for them, and that's where they'll spend the next 8 months.
Well, I should say that Prohibition was in the United States only. And
okay.
In Canada, I mean, that was part of the benefit of Canada, was that you could drink there.
So yes, they'll spend the next couple months here at Fort Smith, and this makes up a good portion of the book too. They I think they really get a sense of the winters in the Arctic at this point. They're thankful to have time where they can spend apart from one another. So Jeff ends up making friends with a fur trapper and goes away for several months, helping him run his trap line.
Oh, so he's not tired. He's just he just wants to be away from Shell.
Yeah. And Shell, it's not entirely clear, seems to spend a good chunk of the winter drinking with Ken Weaver and being some sort of quasi deputy Mountie. He describes going on a trip with Ken Weaver to recover a body and maybe solve a murder mystery, just because he was drinking buddies with this guy.
I can't decide which one of these guys I identify with more.
It's hard. It's a real duality of man thing here with these two. Shell does also do a little bit of dog sledding. He helps. You know, some people who live in the village there run their dog teams, which for listeners, it really is amazing how much of a full-time job that is. You know, if you ever knew anybody who ran a dog team, it's,
oh my God.
Yeah, you're feeding 18 dogs, and these dogs are not pets.
No, they are not tame.
No, when they're not running, you know, hundreds of miles in the winter, they're either sleeping, eating, or like trying to kill one another.
Yeah, full on wolf pack that you somehow have in like makeshift little sheds out on your property where they howl and bark constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never seen a dog more excited than a sled dog that knows it's about to get to go run.
Have you ever seen the sled dog teams in the summer who get harnessed to like old Volkswagens that don't have engines in it?
Four-wheelers that put neutral and they just
so great.
I know. I always feel bad for those dogs too, because it'll be like 80 degrees, you know.
But as you say, they've never been happier than when they're
never. Yeah. So that's how they pass the winter. And one thing my research did uncover is I talked to a man who ran barges on the Mississippi River out of the Twin Cities, who learned to sail from Jeff Pope, and that was part of the research I did. He's been the only living person so far who I've met, at least, who knew Jeff and talked about him. And he said Jeff just talked about how extremely lonely it was in the winter. It sounds like he learned how to run this trap line, and then his buddy was like, well, there you go. The traps are that way. And so he spent all winter, you know, basically alone, running his friend's trap line.
Yeah, those trappers and people that live out in the Arctic in the winter in little one-room cabins, I can't imagine. I mean, I'm a loner. I don't know about you, but that's a level of loneliness I don't know.
I called, certainly when I was younger up there living in Nome, rural Alaska was like the bipolar state, because in summer it is like go disco, like everyone's having a great time.
2 hours of sleep a day.
The kids are out at 2 a.m. playing kickball, you know, it's a great time. And in winter, I certainly fell into this trap of just drinking.
18 hours of sleep a day.
Microwave cooking for one.
Yeah.
You know,
true.
Yeah. So I can't imagine in the 30s there, but they, you know, eventually spring does come. Summer arrives. Spring is really mud season up there. And Shell, in classic Shell fashion, is like, we got to leave right now. He's basically going stir crazy. He wants to go. Everyone who's from there and knows the area up there is telling them what a big mistake it is.
Right.
Wait 2 weeks. But Shell ignores them. So
we call it breakup. It's breakup when the ice starts to loosen its grip, but not 100%.
The wind can take the ice hundreds of miles one day, and you think summer has arrived, and you wake up the next day, and there are mountains of ice back on the shore, which is what they encounter. So they leave against all advice, and they spend 2 weeks going about 30 miles because they are constantly crossing ice dams. Their progress is so slow that it's to the point where their friends from Fort Smith who are pilots are doing checks on them to make sure that they haven't, been crushed by the ice or drowned. But they fight the ice for 2 weeks, and finally they reach the mouth of the Mackenzie River.
Right.
Big river, and it's during ice breakup. It's during spring. And so this is another part of the book that's very sparse because they have a day where they go 95 miles. They have a day where they go 98 miles. They have a day where they go 108 miles. Shell and them, I think at this point, are once again immediately sick of each other now that they're in the canoe together. And Shell is always pushing, they've got to make time. They've got to make time. They are sleeping on the canoe during this stretch. They're just, even in April, May, early May at this point, they've probably got, I don't know exactly, but they've probably got 18 to 19 hours of sunlight,
Right, that high up, sure.
Yeah.
But they also have 18 or 19 million mosquitoes. Well, probably not at this point, right? It's still too cold.
It's still a little early for the mosquitoes. Yeah. So they fly. They end up having shared hallucinations.
Of what?
They're seeing sandbars that don't exist. They're both seeing ledges. They'll wake each other up to see like, hey, did you see that? And they'll say, oh yeah, I saw, did you see our friend waving from the bank? He said, I saw it too, Shell. Like they are pushing themselves so much. They go 900 miles in 10 days on the Mackenzie River.
You're kidding. So they're going, how is the Mackenzie flowing? It's flowing north, but that's downriver. So they're riding the current.
Yep. They're riding the current. All the ice, the spring melt is basically taking them out to the Arctic Ocean.
I mean, that's got to be really fun, but the Arctic Ocean feels like the wrong ocean.
They've got to turn at some point. Yeah. And so they do their 900 miles in 10 days, which is just mind-boggling to me. And it becomes clear, like after you read the whole book, you're going, there's not that many pages left in this, like how do they just quit at one point? Well, no, they do almost 1,000 miles in a week and a half. So at some point they've got to cut over to the Rat River. And this is, I think, probably the most remote portion of their trip. They're when they do decide to stop, they're visiting old mining cabins that have long been abandoned. And this is also probably the most mountainous part of their journey, where they're really going through these like northern rocky kind of slot canyons during the spring breakup. And they're just flying. They go down the Porcupine River relatively quickly, and that's kind of what gets them into Alaska.
So are they also like navigating rapids?
Not so much. They are warned frequently about rapids, and they get to the point where they start to just ignore people's advice or warnings about rapids because they find it to be overblown. They do mention that this Rat River section is like by far the most like rapid. I'm sure, again, because it's the spring melt, right? That the rivers are just raging.
But the Porcupine empties into the Yukon.
It does, yep. So that's they make it from the Porcupine to the Yukon, and they make it to Fort Yukon, which is still for that area kind of the main hub.
Right, big town.
Yep, and that's like the first civilization they've seen at that point in probably 2 weeks, over hundreds of miles. They stop, they get supplies. There's actually I don't know if they still exist to this day. I think they do to maybe move cars across the river, but there's a very like robust like paddle boat system on the Yukon at this time.
Do you want to know the most embarrassing thing about today's episode is that my father and uncle were city managers of Fort Yukon, not North Pole. Were they really? Not North Pole. My car is in Fort Yukon.
It's in Fort Yukon.
Not North Pole. I blanked on the name. It's Fort Yukon is where is where my Chrysler Newport is living. It's like, and there's a boat that goes down the river. There were paddle boats, the whole thing.
Yeah. One day when my wife is just fully exhausted from rolling her eyes at me about this story and all of my research, and I'm going to make it to Fort Yukon to do some, on the streets investigating.
Now, when you get there,
Plymouth.
Well, it's a Chrysler, but yes,
Chrysler. Yes,
it's root beer colored Chrysler, 2-door Imperial. Well, it's a Newport, but it was the Imperial Newport. I want you to find this car because I'm sure you're right. It may not still be running. It may, but it's somewhere up there, and I want you to take a picture of it.
I'm going to find the 8-track tapes.
I'm so embarrassed. They did have an 8-track player. I'm so embarrassed that I got the name of the town wrong that I'm just like covered in shame. But no, it was Fort Yukon. I bet you there are still village elders there that would remember my dad and uncle because they used to, it was a contentious relationship. The village was run by a native corporation, and here were these two white guys. But they asked, they brought Dad and Uncle Jack in there. They weren't colonizers.
Your dad and uncle had to have known. And I know we've got to wrap up on time, but they had to have known Don Young.
So we had a long. There in Alaska. There were Don Young people. Well, Don Young was the congressman, and he had
he was the lone representative who I think represented them when they were a colony.
Yeah, and
up
Don
until
Young,
the time he died, and I think he just recently died. He was in office forever.
He was, and he had a Fort Yukon connection.
Yeah, that was his home base, at least while he was a rep.
Right.
Yeah.
Crazy. So yeah, of course they knew him. My uncle was mayor of Anchorage in the 70s. So they were all one big happy family of white Americans up there running the state.
Yeah. I remember Don Young and his name escapes me, Uncle Teddy. We called
Ted
him.
Stevens, who was he was Uncle Jack's law partner in the 60s.
Okay.
And they were best friends until Ted died.
So for the listeners, Alaska, and especially rural Alaska, really thrived and floated on a sea of pork barrel funds that these two congressmen, by just
Ted was the senator, but yeah,
and living longer than anyone else, had such outsized influence for the 400,000 people that lived in Alaska. I cannot stress enough how even the biggest granolas and libertarians of Alaska would maybe hate these two men, but love that they got a paved airport for whatever village.
Oh, they loved him. Ted Stevens at the end was the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He was one of the highest ranking senators in the country. And like you say, represented 450,000 Alaskans, but he knew where all the bodies were buried.
One of the only times I am aware of where a living person has an airport named after him.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to his birthday party once at the convention center, and at some point during and like everybody went there, like their soup bowl had the seal of the U.S. Senate on it, and it said something to "Happy Birthday, Ted," and we all got to take them. I have one upstairs, but at one point, a bunch of generals, 4-star generals, appeared on the stage doing the can-can. And my dad leaned over and he was like, "You want to see power? You want to see American power?"
Yeah,
it's like 7 4-star generals who are all here, first of all, and they're doing a can for this guy.
That's so that power. He will fund their battleships and Air Force bases. Yeah,
incredible.
It's incredible. So they leave Fort Yukon. They start just paddling down the Yukon at this point. And they're, even during this stretch, they're still far enough along that they're averaging 60 miles a day.
Yeah.
Going down the Yukon.
The river's hauling in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And they're just flying. So the Yukon empties into the Bering Sea. One thing of note that this has been just gives you some insight into my, brainworm-addled brain. The part that I've researched the most is they encounter somebody 200 miles outside of Fort Yukon who refers to himself as the Mad Woodcutter. Woodcutter was a phrase I was not familiar with. I assumed it was like a logger or something.
Why
but
does
it
that
seems
sound
like,
familiar? It sounds like some kind of Vermont Headless Horseman character.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It struck a chord with me. But woodcutters were people who, also lunatics like Arctic fur traders, very lonely existence. Instead of trapping animals, though, they would cut timber and bring it to the beach of the Yukon so that the wood-fired paddle boats had fuel.
Oh. And
So
then
that
they just had a little sign on them that said, take one and leave $1 or something?
They would be employed by the river or the paddle boat companies. And so they would say, you are responsible for, supplying the fuel and having it ready for this stretch of the Yukon so that we can fuel our paddle boats. And they'd been making a practice of stopping at cabins. And it's custom up there, even when I was up there, that in a lot of places in rural Alaska, if you're not worried about problem bears getting in, you leave the door to your cabin open, right?
So nobody kicks the door down.
Nobody kicks the door down, or if you had visitors that were stopping by, they may stay a day or two until you get back from wherever you're at.
For sure.
Snow machines, excuse me. I almost forgot my Alaskan. Snow machines break down, and you might need one for, an emergency shelter. So they stop at this cabin, which they describe as like a very low slung, sunk into the earth. And a 50-year-old grizzled man, so imagine you without a haircut in 10 years.
Thank you.
Severe hump, comes in, and he refers to himself in the third person as the Mad Woodcutter, and starts warning them and asking them if they're agents of the Social Democrats.
Wow. So there's already somebody in Alaska that's worried about big federal government coming for for his guns.
He's 200 miles outside of Fort Yukon, worried about the Social Democrats who have been trying to get him. He warns them.
Alaska, don't ever change.
It paints just the perfect picture of Alaska as this weird mixture of hippie granola types, libertarians, and like gun-toting Republicans that somehow coexist up there.
Yeah, total lunatics.
Yeah, and it just endlessly cracks me up that it wasn't just my experience, that's how that state has seemingly always been.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Half the people are on cross-country skis and listening to NPR, and then 5 acres over, there's a guy with a D9 Caterpillar who's trying to dig to the center of the earth.
Yes, and their kids both go to school together, and they also interestingly describe it as he has a whole wall that's a full law library, and he has like stacks of Illinois bound in leather court cases, books, and they describe him as being so crazy they're afraid for their lives as they quickly extract. The whole time he's raving about Social Democrats. 90% of my research has been spent on this man, trying to learn his life story.
The Mad Woodcutter.
He is maybe to no one's surprise, not left much of a paper trail. I've not been able to find much. But aside from that, they just, they stop at villages along the way. They make it down the length of the Yukon. They get to Mountain Village, Alaska, which is very close to the Bering Sea, and that's what they both describe as the low point of their trip. They're both totally sick of each other at this point. They decide that on the spot they're going to duke it out.
They're going to duke it out.
They're going to duke it out. Shell has this long tirade about Jeff is 30 pounds heavier and many inches bigger, and they were fighting to a certain boxing law, which maybe, didn't fit his fighting style. I don't know. Reading between the lines, it sounds like Jeff beats the snot out of him.
It
My
feels
perception.
it feels like Jeff maybe had the advantage there.
You look at the pictures of him. Jeff's like a full head taller and has broader. I mean, they're both skinny, depression kids, but and they in the course of this, then they leave their coats on the sandbar when they both get back in the canoe. So after they both walloped each other for a while, they go like another 20 miles and realize they've left their coats, which at this point they're on the Bering Sea. They're on the coast in like late May.
Yeah, but my geology of Alaska or geography of Alaska is not the best, but mountain villages where the Yukon empties in to the Bering Sea is nowhere near Nome.
No, they still have hundreds of miles at this point. So they essentially travel hundreds of miles without their coats.
God.
They're just sick of each other. They're trudging along. They're following the coast line now on the Bering Sea, and there are villages along the way that they can stop at.
But it's not a direct coast. It's like a bay.
Yeah, exactly. And a good portion of that is like straight cliff, right? Like it's ocean and then sheer vertical walls. So they're just getting relentlessly pounded by the waves. And this portion, they're using antiquated, for the time, cutting edge materials, but they've got like down sleeping bags that are just so damp now from the sea that they offer no insulation at all. They're like sleeping on sandbars. Again, they have no winter coats because they left them on the beach after duking it out. And that's the rest of their trip. There's a couple other notable parts. They get in a fight over how to properly kill a caribou that they're hunting for food, but they just keep kind of following the coast. Word is spread at this point, so at the villages, people know they're coming, and they typically get a meal and they meet the school or the village reverend. But it's very nondescript, and in the journal you can just tell they're done. Like they want this trip to be over. And so August 11th, about 18 months later, they finally paddle into Nome. There's no fanfare.
Poor guys.
It makes the Nome Nugget. It makes the front page on the Nome Nugget next to stories probably about, the colonial legislature and gold prices. It makes the AP News Bulletin, and that's it. Their story goes nowhere. So they've made it to Nome. They quickly get planes, and at this point it's unclear. I've spoke to the author of the book, Rick Stieber, who has a little bit of an epilogue on what happens with their life. And I know more about Jeff, but they go back to New York. They don't have jobs. They haven't made it rich. No one's interested in their story because Hitler has come to power during this time. The Hindenburg has, exploded.
The Social Democrats have taken over the
Social Democrats
White
have, seized the White House. It just goes nowhere. They basically, the story fades into obscurity at this point, aside from this book. And it amazes me something. They own the Guinness World Record for longest canoe trip for several years.
Wait, did somebody come along and beat them at their own game?
Well, Shell, to his dying breath, will claim that the people who broke his record shouldn't count because they were actually in sea kayaks. And they did it together. It wasn't a canoe trip.
Right.
But the people at Guinness don't make that distinction, I guess.
Well, I believe that Shell is correct.
I'm kind of with Shell on that one. Yeah. They say they are so sick of this that they ship the canoe back to New York City and neither one pays for it. They just they refuse to pay for it and pick it up, so it just sits and I don't know, it probably gets split into firewood at some point.
Sure, molders and
on the dock. But Shell, his family lives in Hawaii, so after this he goes to Hawaii and he for a time makes it. He owns the Coca-Cola distributor or bottling company for Hawaii, and for a very short period seems to do very well for himself. And then Pearl Harbor happens, and the government, again, vehicles pressed into service. The government takes all of his trucks for the war effort.
Right. Probably commandeered the Coca-Cola bottling plant for
So
the Navy.
He loses that he goes on to work for the Honolulu Paper Company.
Guy's got to make a living.
Yep. Jeff becomes a salesperson. He sells ladies' garments in the Twin Cities. And
once again, I feel like Jeff wins.
Yeah. And what amazes me is throughout this whole book, Jeff is described again as being extremely lazy and a bump on the log. The whole way I heard about this story is on a women's clothing salesman's income in the Twin Cities in the 70s, more or less single-handedly funds the construction of the Sheila Yates two-masted ship. How that person can be lazy, I don't know, but he does, and he becomes, he certainly in my area at least, becomes famous for teaching people how to sail. And till basically his dying days, he becomes a famous sailboat captain up here.
He used that sailboat then as an instruction platform for teaching people to sail.
Yeah, it seems like he is stretched to the limit, again, funding the construction of a two-masted wooden ship on a salesman's income. And so any work he can get out of this ship, he does. He does charters on it in his free time. He runs a sailing school out of here. One of the people who I was able to correspond with talks about how he just would totally ignore customs and sail in and out of Canada, and how they were always left dealing with the repercussions. The Sheila Yates' most famous trip, he sails it out to Greenland, where it's actually, and he's in his 70s or 80s at this point. And it sinks. It gets hit by ice, and there's a daring rescue at sea off the coast of Greenland by a Norwegian cod fisher ship. So if people want another fun rabbit hole to go down, look up the Sheila Yates. But
well, I don't, to the descendants of Shell, I don't want to pit these two against each other in terms of who lived their best life. But it sounds like Jeff found a way to live according to his own law.
It really does. Shell seems to, do well in business. And I don't know that he ever had any kids. He marries, lives outside of Reno. The whole way that Rick Steber, the author, outside of Reno, Nevada, the whole way Rick Steber learns about him is, again, reading between the lines, it seems like Shell's a kind of a partier, drinker type. He sees Rick Steber talking on daytime television about some other show and cold calls the TV station and is like, tell that paper pusher if I got a story for him and I've got all the liquor he could want. And that's how this book is ultimately published as he gets his journal and tells the story.
So he finally does. He finally capitalizes on the story and gets a little notoriety.
Yep. 50 years later. I don't think they made any money off of it. No one makes money off of this story. Hopefully you will be the first with an influx of Patreon supporters.
Wow. Do you think it's possible that whole trip culminates in me getting my monthly Patreon
My fingers are crossed that this is when the story finally pays dividends. Rick Steber, the author who I mentioned I talked to, he does tell a funny story. This was relatively early in his writing career. And he sells the rights to this story to Disney and Paul Newman. And this is in the early or mid 80s. And he thinks, I'm not going to let, those Hollywood types take advantage of me. So he said he hired a lawyer to draft whatever, I don't know how deals like this work, but to draft the contract and the language. And he said, I'm making up numbers here, so they're not exact figures, but of his $20,000 that he gets for the movie rights, the lawyer takes $15,000 of it.
Yeah, I can't confirm. Was the lawyer by any chance the Mad Woodcutter? And did he get his information from Illinois law books from the teens?
He did practice law. maybe I can come back the second part story once I fully exhaust the story of the Mad Woodcutter. But yeah, it's that's the tale. It's a story that doesn't even have a Wikipedia these days, right? It's as obscure as it gets, but a fascinating one to me.
Well, this is the whole raison d'être, as we say when we're talking about being a voyageur who portages, of the omnibus, which is that stories like this would not make it onto the internet if not for this project right here at this moment in time. And it may be that eventually there is a Wikipedia about this, and these adventurers are remembered, and it will be entirely because of you, Jacob. That so again, it's possible that you are the facilitator of the preservation of this great adventure.
That is its own reward. The only thing greater will be that sweet feeling of vindication when I prove to my wife that this wasn't a fool's errand, and that now the Carl name will live in history as the story is etched into the platinum discs that are shot into space.
Does your wife roll her eyes at you listening to the omnibus, or does she also join you?
She mostly falls asleep to it on long car rides. That's been my experience. And occasionally I will giggle over something you or Ken say and wake her up, and she harumphs at me and goes back to sleep.
I've discovered in my long history of podcasting that the number of people that listen to me in order to fall asleep is not only not insignificant, but it's become like, it feels like in a way, one of my core competencies is being some kind of voice that just lulls people into like, and you realize, they really trust you. They trust you to
I suppose. Yeah. In a way, it's a compliment. Yeah.
But when this episode airs, you're going to have to sit her down and make her listen all the way through, and she'll realize what a great broadcaster you are, a natural entertainer.
Yeah, maybe, hopefully. I am one of those people who cannot stand the sound of my own voice, so I may have to have her summarize this one. I don't know.
That may be your 1994 Logitech gamer headset. And maybe if you got one, just upgrade it a little.
Yep, upgrade to the boom mic.
Yeah, that your wife may find your voice also something that she could fall asleep to.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, this was great,
Jacob, and we'll let you know when your episode airs, and I appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back on when you learn more about either the Mad Woodcutter or the other cranks that you've mentioned on this show.
Yeah. There's plenty of cranks out there in history, so I have high hopes for the project moving forward.
Thank you. I hope you think it's a good show. All right. Well, we'll talk to you again soon, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks.
And that concludes New York to Nome. Entry 835.AC2710. Certificate number 44688 in the omnibus. If you enjoyed today's show and you'd like to write us with compliments or minor corrections, please feel free to email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. If you want to interact with other fans of the show and futurelings, just Google the term futureling and social media sites will pop up like mushrooms growing on a dying log. If you'd like to send us mail, packages, envelopes, postcards, paintings, send it to The Omnibus Project at 609 Southwest 150th Street, number 48084. That's box number 48084. Burien, Washington, 98166. And if you'd like to contribute to the production and support of the show, please go to patreon.com/omnibusproject, where you'll find all kinds of fascinating addenda and additional material, supporting material, shows going back into the very mists of time, or the earliest shows of Omnibus, all the many, many shows featuring Ken Jennings as co-host. You can find them at patreon.com/omnibusproject. And please look for today's show
as a video podcast on YouTube at Omnibus Project on YouTube. Future links from our vantage point in your distant past. We have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.